only and those who are participating online. Today we have a very important event. The event which we were mentioning so many times, the initiatives which needed for Ukraine today, they should go not from the government. And you know, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has announced the victory plan. Of course, we would like to hear this word even more often, but these plans were announced both in the parliament and also in the public regarding the fulfillment of this format. And I'm very glad that Mr. Knyzhynski, who is a member of the parliament and the big team of the experts who we trust so much, I suggest you to check with these experts. It shouldn't be that the biggest source of information and the most clear ones that are American media, even despite all my respect. That should be Ukrainians who work in this sphere, who know this sphere, and who can coordinate the efforts to help the country. And therefore, I appreciate your serious plan. I appreciate your approach. The plan, which should be the part of the attention of the president and the parliament, and the thing that you have coordinated your efforts to establish the consortium of the defense information, and that is what we are going to mention today. And I would like to wish you this team, which was newly established, the team of very strong experts, the people who work in the as state officials, and today they are the experts. I would like to wish them good luck. I wish them their work, their discussions to be not just the public words, but to become the part of the real actions of the Ukrainian government. In this case, we can hear victory again. In this case, we will hear the serious discussion not only in Crisis Media Center, which is non-official source, but also during the meeting with official representatives. So I'm passing the floor to moderator. Greetings, Vasil Pechno. So I would like to have it not just an ordinary event with reports. We have journalists, we have people. You can raise your hands, where you can ask the questions, and we will try to integrate. We will try to make this event as interactive as possible for us to be able to discuss, to tell something and to be understood, because that is a very big document, which in fact was the grounds of the public initiative. Was based on the public initiative. Mr. Valeriy said that we have to return victory to our vocabulary, and the internal planned resilience plan is called the resilience plan. So we have to return this victory word, and resilience is something that we are going to discuss today, starting from what we are going to do with mobilization, and finishing with suggestions on mobilization, and finishing with what should we do with our own defense sector. I would like to introduce all the participants who are with us today. We have also some participants online. So, Valentin Badrak, Director of the Center for Army Conversation and Disarmament Studies, co-founder of the Defense Information Consortium. Serhiy Zguras, Director of the Defense Express IKK, co-founder of the Defense Information Consortium. He is with us online. Mikhail Samus, Director of the New Geopolitical Research Network, co-founder of the Defense Information Consortium. Alexei Yezhak, National Institute for Strategic Studies, co-founder of the Defense Information Consortium online. Mykola Knyzhynski, People's Deputy of People, member of the Supervisory Board of the Defense Information, was presented by Valeriy. Later, Volodymyr Gavrilov, Major General, Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, 2022-2023. Igor Fomenko, General Director of Ukrainian Association of the Russian Federation of Defense. That is the way we are going to work. I would like to ask Mr. Zguras to present consortium. What was the reason for its establishment? What is the objective? And briefly about the document we are going to discuss today. Because, you know, I was thinking before the beginning of this event about the fact that the previous week we had information that 1.2 million drones were procured with the government's support. So it became a kind of meme discussion. Some people are aggressive about that. Some people say that where are the drones? I'm quite sure that we have more drones than 1 million, but nevertheless, people are concerned why volunteers continue buying these drones. I think that volunteers around 10-15% covering the drones, but that are important percentage. It is important percentage, and if we retransform volunteer community in public initiative, that will be kind of more Western approach where the expert environment has an impact on the government. And I think that Mr. Serhiy is going to have the first question. So the first words on why we are here. Greetings. So our participants. Yes, indeed, there is a second big event with a consortium, Defense Information Consortium. Mr. Valeriy has presented our structure, and we are working with Defense Express, and we have experts from various topics. We have supervisory board where we have Ukrainian and foreign partners. For example, Mr. Kozitsky, as the member of the parliament who supported analytical alliance of the structures, which can have an impact on the important directions and crystallize better the defense military practices which we need at the moment. And we will be supporting defense military companies, more support to the government if the government is ready to listen to our decisions and recommendations. And also we have the regular closed products, analytical products, which is called reflects with recommendations. And yes, indeed, we've made a vision on defense components of the internal plan for resilience. That is the document which includes justification of all the directions, including defense, mobilization, and improvement of the army management. At the moment, that is a very relevant question, fortification, and even the questions related to the nuclear weapons, because that is a component which requires discussion on the expert level with all the risks and the perspectives in this sphere. And our document appeared 1 month before the resilience plan, which was presented on the 19th of November 2024, and Vladimir Zelensky was saying that we shouldn't be afraid of talking about important questions. We should be looking for suggestions and ways out. And our conference is dedicated now to the improvement of the components of the internal resilience plan. I think that thanks to the uniting the efforts of the experts who participate our conference today, who know a lot about our defense sector, we will have a symbiosis of the positive decisions which will make the changes we need faster, both for the resilience and for the successes on the front line. So I hope that the further discussion of the components of the internal resilience plan, they will be needed also, and they will have a big impact on the situation. Mr. Bedrock will probably start presenting the practical plans and what is suggested by this document, but I would like to ask Mr. Kняжицький to think about the following question. So whatever we are talking about here, we need to talk about the practical context and how theoretically we can implement these in this sense. And when let's start with the social things, mobilization. At the moment, that is a very relevant question. Just on the way here, maybe many of you can see the materials of Ukrainska Pravda newspaper, the truth about one of our brigades, where so to say, they have not a very good attitude towards the servicemen, and their money were taken away from them, and the people were forced to go to the basement. So that are the things which should not take place in Ukrainian army. So thinking about that, I thought that there are three piles which we would like to see in both army and the society. And these three piles is respect, trust, trust. How can we achieve that? Greetings. Thank you, Mr. Vasil. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Valeriy for the opportunity, for the organization of this event, for this positive representation of our analytical group. I would like to be not talking that much in the introduction. Maybe we'll have questions, and it will be better to answer the questions, because in our document we have 10 provisions, and we can be talking a lot about each of the provisions. So I would like to say that we have covered the following things. Why actually this idea appeared, and why the need appeared. The need, in our expert opinion, on the establishment of the resilience plan, because we see that, yes, we do need strong Western weapon. We need the guarantees, of course, but nevertheless, without internal plan, without homework done, it will be very hard to be talking about victory. And therefore, our document is dedicated to the homework we haven't done. And it concerns mobilization, it concerns army, and not only organizational structure, but also the staff policy. It also concerns the defense sector and the missile program, and also partially it is dedicated to the opportunities or the possibilities of revising non-nuclear status of Ukraine. So I'm not going to be talking about the internal questions in each of these blocks, but a small remark. So do we have the reserves? Yes, we have lots of reserves in our society. And how can we make it work? We have to form the central vertical centers to resolve separate questions. Mr. Vasil has mentioned as an example the drones, the unmanned vehicles. So in one of the reflection sessions, we have described how can we improve the UAV policy, which we unfortunately do not have so far. And the center in this case should be the military structures. In this case, the forces of the UAV forces, which are not allowed to expand. So you are talking about vertical centers, and you mean that the servicemen have to play the main role. For example, if there is a missile program, in this case we consider that, by the way, in July we had the deputy on the missile sector. So that is a very good decision. The government has good decisions, but how can we move from decision to implementation? Because at the moment there are problems. For example, if we are talking about missiles. And one more remark, I would like to say that our plan, our document was issued on the 4th of November through our channels, informal and unofficial. We have passed this document, so to say, with the hope that it will be received in the government. And the things which are happening so far, we have the hope that someone heard something. Because some of the provisions which we are disclosing is in this, here we can see that they are resolved now. For example, there is a decision about the shift to the corporal brigade system, even though we were suggesting corpus divisional structure, or even when it comes to mobilization. But I'm not going to take more time if there will be questions. So could you tell us the structures and the elements of this document for us to understand what we're talking about? Because So, in fact, we thought that it's going to be Mikhailo who will tell that. First of all, there are the negative factors, which have the biggest impact on the situation. The second, there are the possible steps to neutralization of mitigation of the risks and threats. The third is communicational strategy and consolidation of society, the critical component of Ukraine. And you can see that there is also victory in this sentence. And also the fourth, resolving the problems of demobilization. Fifth, recommendation on the improvement of the management in the army. That is about the structure and the staff policy. And the sixth one, fortification. The seventh, improving procurement, military component. Eighth, improvement of the military defense sector. Why it turned into the threat to national threat. So the obstacles of reforming. And the ninth, the recommendation on the improvement and development of the Ukrainian missiles. And the 10th, the policy on the nuclear weapon. 10 provisions, 10 points. So that's the government has received this document unofficially, so it can become the plan, the resilience plan. But there is always a difference between can and will. So how can we make this difference smaller? Thank you very much. I would like to thank Mr. Charlie and the Crisis Media Center. For us, it's a great honor to be here. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, many of us understood that we have to inform the people on what is going on. Considering the fact that I am the co-founder of Espresso TV channel, and we have invited the Defense Information Consortium to cooperate with consortium. Considering the fact that they are analyticians, and analyticians want to work with analytics, and they know how to do that, it was a great honor for us to support this analytical work. I'm a practical politician. And during the war, there is no difference, and I'm bold to say that which political party I support, because we don't have a real political life, and we strive to destroy our enemy. And the responsibility of each patriotic person is to do everything possible to destroy the enemy. As a politician, I'm facing the lack of information which I need. For example, I'm the co-founder of the contact group with Poland, and when the defense committee of the Polish parliament arrived to Ukraine, and when these people who are professionals and live in the republic where the parliament plays a huge role, and they are controlling all the military processes, and they are contacting us with the similar questions. So we have to be ready to be professional talking to them, and therefore we need the information. So I gave you one example, but at the same time I work with different international directions, also in ASEAN, in Asia, and also in many other regions of the world where politicians from executive branches of power, they're raising the questions when Ukrainian delegations arrive. And we have to be professional answering these. Where can we get this information from? In many democratic countries, this information is taken from analytical centers. They can belong to affiliated with political parties like in the US or in Germany. They can be independent, as for example the Institute of the War Institute. But that are the foreign tools for analytical products. So what in Ukraine we can present first to inform our government about different positions of analytical think tanks, no matter what their political position is, to inform our partners, and finally to tell something to the society to counter misinformation. In fact, there is no single mechanism to do that. Even though Ukrainian military think tanks are on very high European level, and I have an honor to talk to the colleagues who are at this table and who are not at this table, and with the foreign experts, and the foreigners say that themselves, that our military experts are not worse than in those think tanks in Europe and the US. And therefore the colleagues decided to unite, and me and the other colleagues from politics from Ukraine, and not only from Ukraine, decided to support this movement to unite strong Ukrainian think tanks. So there are state ones, private ones, and together we need to develop the analytical thought which will be useful for the Ukrainian state official bodies. In fact, we can see half a year report but the Ministry of Defense and many other official bodies, they've received the reflections, and we are discussing the weekly the problems during the week, starting from the Trump's plan and finishing with and analysis of the political military situation. And they are reading that, and I'm sure that Minister of Defense are reading them, and the officials from the other ministries read them. We have the feedback, and we hope that this work will be also useful for them. But that we have to develop further, and probably the next step will be the preparation of the bulletins for the Ukrainian society, not only indirectly, because indirectly it is already happening, and the many experts are writing for the in many media, and they're using the information of their colleagues to inform the society. In this way, we establish the network of the experts who add a resilience to our society, who help us to counter fakes launched by the enemy or by unprofessional people who call themselves experts. And therefore, this is a kind of guideline for the experts who are in media. That is a serious work. It's not just a document. That is a weekly edition. That is a serious document for the government. And of course, we would like to have more discussion with more ministries, and also with the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Military Industry, and of course with the Council of Defense, and also with Customs Service, and with the National Guard, because we have to understand what is happening in this war against us. We have to understand the ways to win. We have to understand and to speak in one voice, not only the policy of just one house in Ukraine, the representatives of which are living abroad, but all the branches of power and actually all the society. And we have to speak in one voice. And of course, the parliament has to do that, because parliamentary diplomacy plays a huge role in our resilience. Members of the parliament, and I'm the member of it because unfortunately I'm the part of it, they are, so to say, soft, very soft, or they are relying on unsystematized thoughts of so-called experts which they get from media. So we have to establish politically not affiliated think tank, which would be beneficial both for the government and for the civil society, and most of all for the citizens. In some of the country, this work is conducted in the universities. For example, we were working with a huge Tel Aviv think tank, which is the biggest one in those regions. And their analytical data, there are people with different political positions, and the brigade generals, and people with high positions, but their work is on the table of all the officials before the decision is made, and no matter who is in power, that is political, but they have no war. And we have these analytical centers, and each of the analytical centers is worth attention. And to make it even more efficient, we decided to organize this consortium, where the best thoughts of the analyticians will affect our resilience and our defense capability. You mentioned the public agreement, and I was reflecting before the full-scale war. You could have imagined that it means that the state pretends that they care about citizens, and citizens pretend that they pay taxes. So when we're talking about the war and the real understanding of what should we do and whether we have resources and what is our plan, yes, indeed, in this case, we need the new agreement. So we have the question. One question, and then we can move forward for everyone to participate in this discussion, because, for example, if you need to clarify something, Mr. McCauley, the question to you, you said this state public center, how does it work? Should it be comma in between or something else? So I meant that these document and the other documents we are preparing, both the state centers, for example, Institute of the Strategic Researches, which is the state one, and also private and public think tanks, no matter who they are owned by, because in the conditions of war we are quite confident that we need to be united and to have the discussion to find the single solution. And before the war, everyone could rely on the state financing, on some grants, on some other support. They could compete for each other. And considering the war, we have the following challenges, and both state, public and private sector, they have to work together also in the analytical sphere to prepare the good analytics for the politicians who do not have it, and for the society who has to counter disinformation. We all have seen what was happening in Romania. In fact, that was a catastrophe, and that is also one of the elements of the security. And informational wars are also mentioned in these reports. When bots with Russian funds through South American banks, they raise the support of the politician from 1 to 20 and even more, and then this politician wins, and only thanks to reconnaissance the Constitutional Court stops this. In fact, they stop the pirate type usurpation of power, and the challenges we are facing, they are even higher than the Romania has, because we have hot phase of the war, and therefore everyone feels their responsibility. And considering the fact that young people who are volunteering to defend our country, and they consider it their responsibility, and everyone, each of us, has to do something for our victory. That is the reason why we are uniting the best politicians of the country. Thank you very much. I understood it now. Thank you very much. So let's move forward. We have the representative of the State Institute of the Strategic Researches, Alexei Yezhak. Mr. Igor, I have the question to you. When we are talking about the importance of the analytical centers, about delivering this information, you know, UAV expert, they say it's kind of jammer obstacles. So in military institutions, so you are serving for dozens of years. Do we need this kind of analytical information? And if it is obvious that they need it, so how can we prepare it, for example, for the Minister of Defense? Because in the US, it is, the researches are conducted according to the request. Greetings, everyone. My life experience... in my life experience, I was preparing lots of military experts, and I was working a lot with analytical think tanks, with British, American, and Romanian centers, think tanks, both state ones, state-owned, and private. And here we need systematic work, because indeed the state centers, state think tanks, which are typically based in special service in Ukraine, that is reconnaissance community, they work with information which they receive from many sources which are not accessible for the public analytical think tanks. At the same time, they became at the moment, the information which they get outside the open access sources, gradually, it can be very gradually and very slowly delivered to the top. And actually, top management of the countries, they are more relying more on the open access sources. Because, for example, speaking of the U.S., for informing of their presidents, who started to trust newspapers more because they didn't have time, and they didn't have time to dive deep into the reports of the reconnaissance intelligence. So they had the position briefer who once a day who comes to the president of the U.S. and debriefs him on the main topics for today. And it is done for the president to understand what is happening in 5 minutes. Because if you put a file on his table and ask him to read it, in this case, it will not work out. And the first phenomenon for this system was Donald Trump in 2017, who came to the room and who has never read any kind of analytical documents. This Twitter phenomenon, when the president of a big country started to talk to the citizens through Twitter without reading, without listening to briefers. That is one of the problems. But nevertheless, we are talking about the quality of the analytics, which we have to make decisions. And therefore, for the political management, we have the reliable information from the intelligence. That is number one. All the information has to be reliable, trustful, and as fast as possible. That is a challenge. Second of all, due to the fact that there is a lot of information in open sources, and we have mega data and big data, it means that we need more analysis of the open sources, which unfortunately has advantages and disadvantages. Advantages that there is lots of information and it covers the aspects which are not covered by intelligence, and on the same time there is a huge ocean of the misinformation or the disinformation. In this case, we have to have strong support from various non-state affiliated institutions, which, thanks to their experience, can analyze this information and provide us with analytical products. And therefore, the management will be able to make better decisions. And one of the things we are doing today is we're contributing to this, to resolve this question. But we are in the era of the digital era, and information reaches each of us, but this information is not analyzed, it's raw. It's even worse than lack of information at all. And therefore, we have to find the ways to analyze it and the methods of educating the citizens, for people to be to know how to use information, even considering these amounts. But the government has to rely on the information delivered by intelligence. It sometimes is received from the open sources, but mostly from the sites. And there is the definition of human, optic, signature, intelligence, and all of these components, they give you the information which is relevant for decision making. The rest of the information is useful for the understanding of the general situation, and therefore the role of the analytical centers of non-governmental cases is very important. So let's continue. I would like to ask Mr. Alexei Yirak to join us. By the way, Mr. Valeriy Chawi on many events mentions that now we have the smaller impact of the Ministry of Foreign Defense, and that is that are the changes in approaches in the modern approach of the government. Me, as a representative of the media, I remember when the government took the office, they said that we do not need traditional media, and that is our approach. So do you get this challenge when it comes to the delivery of the alternative point of view to the government? Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. I think that many of us face this situation, but nevertheless, maybe that is the way the information works. I would like to say a few words whether it is relevant what we are writing in the context of the negotiations which can take place with the new administration of the U.S. administration. But where do we get the information and how important it is? There are the memoirs of General Goodwin, that is the U.S. commander, and he was saying how he was preparing this operation. And actually, he got the order during the march. The British Navy group was returning home from exercises, and he had to rest. And then he got the order from honesty, and they have to prepare the preparation of deliberation. They got additional forces, but everything they had, that is the guidelines, Jane's guidelines in the flagmanship library. On the Jane's guidelines, they have developed the first draft of operation on how what they can do, and they saw what kind of weapon does the enemy have. And if we are able if we can add something to the information which is used to make the decision, then it is really great. But here we have the problem. There is a problem of the integral accessible information, which will be universally accessible. And of course, it cannot be public, fully public. Maybe there should be different levels of classification, but there should be the problem. We have integrate different sources. And now, speaking of what we are writing about, we have wrote, and of course, there is a state resilience plan. There are alternative visions of the experts and how relevant it is, whether it is what if after inauguration the political situation will change drastically? The brief answer we can give at the moment, no, nothing changes drastically. There can be a pause in military actions. It is not guaranteed, but it is possible. During this pause, these problems which we accumulated in the defense sector can be resolved. And during this pause, some certain political processes can be launched and some political issues might be resolved, because the country has not only the military issues, but also the informational deformation, and they can be dangerous as well if they take too long. But nevertheless, but nothing drastically will change. Maximum what we can suggest, what Donald Trump plan can suggest, nothing new. They are comparing to what society, humankind knows. So even if we look at the previous engagement of the U.S. To big wars, for example, the Balkan wars, in this case, the position of the U.S. was even more radical than it is now. And at that time, the U.S. came to the conclusion that to stop the military actions and then to stop negotiations and then to get the sustainable peace, you need to use power. And when you will have the balance of power, then you can start stabilizing and peaceful negotiations. And what we can hear and what can take place, that is a pause in military actions. But as we can hear, it is going to work not as it worked in the Balkan wars by punishing aggressor. Maybe it will be pressure on aggressor, maybe through China. After this, it is suggested to launch the European stabilization forces to cease fire. So something what took place in the Balkans, and now Donald Trump suggests a U-form, which will be formed maybe later, but these forces have to stabilize the situation at this point, till the point when you can get more global peace. And of course, during this period of time, we will have and it is impossible when the paper will substitute army. It is just impossible, as it is due to the way how the international system works. So what is the strength of the paper documents, even the document like Washington agreements or the statute of the UN? Paper is strong at the places where the organization is in place. So if you have the organization which guarantees response to some certain promises, even if you consider it the Article 5 of the Washington agreements, you can see nothing special that it provides you with the guarantees. And the organization and the placement of the army, the procedures, the preparation, the same thing we can say about any kind of agreement which can be used in the Russian war against Ukraine. So we are talking about balance here. We are talking about balance and about the procedures which are launching the guaranteed reaction of our partners, and that is a guarantee. But the pause really can take place, and during this pause in military actions, we need to resolve the questions which are hard to resolve now. Corpus divisional structure, and also human resource capital issues. We will need to resolve the problem of the weapons and the defense production, and also we will have to resolve the problem of the defense. And all our partners can provide us with the differential, those balance which we might be lacking in the relations with our enemy. So if we have 1 million people in the army and they are well prepared, that is one case, and in this case we can get guarantees for this weapon and for these people. And if the army is 300,000 people, then no guarantees and nothing, because no one has the strong army to help support us. And coming back to what we started with, so that there might be some political processes that will be triggered during this pause to establish sustainable peace. And the one who will resolve this problem will win, because these problems will not disappear. Thank you for your attention. Well, actually, you mentioned a very practical part, and I think that it will be even more interesting than the general introduction. So if we want to, speaking of the exact things we need to correct. So after each speaker, I will try to do a small summary, and you can tell me whether I'm correct about it. So the first thing, some kind of frozen conflict is possible, and that is going to be the window of opportunities to resolve the complex of issues which we have not only in the army, but I think more in the society. I mean, our resilience and defense. Am I correct? Yes. Yes. That is the most probable scenario of what can happen around negotiation. So the pause for everyone to resolve their problems before we get sustainable and fair peace. Okay, so Mr. Mikhailo Samus, I would like you to invite you to the mic. So Mr. Valentin has said that you had to talk about the structure. So let's talk about the practical things. So what in the framework of this pause, if it is going to take place, even though it is not 100% true that it will happen, so what should we do and what should we pay attention to? The first thing. So speaking of I think that every expert is working on his or her component, and then we will talk about suggestions. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the organization of this event in Ukraine Crisis Media Center. I would like to thank Mr. Charlie for this opportunity to discuss the most painful questions, because when we're talking about resilience, these terms in English sounds resilience. There is resistance and resilience. Resilience in the scientific perspective, that is the ability of the nation to adjust to the opportunities to resolve the national task under negative conditions. We had a few cases like that in our national history, in the recent history of Ukraine, when Ukraine was able to adjust, to overcome this pressure and to continue developing. It happened a few times during the last 30 years, and the most famous times was the Revolution of Dignity, that is 2014 and 2022, when Ukrainian nation resisted, even though both most intelligence services of the world, having all the classified information, they were wrong. They were wrong about whether Ukraine will be able to resist the direct conflict with the Russian Federation. And we can say that the international intelligence was wrong. And at that time, we were working even before 2022. Since 2017, we were telling and our analytical think tanks were saying that the Russian Federation is already ready for the full-scale war. And we started saying that in 2017. After the exercises in 2017, when they established 3 separate armies around Ukraine, the first tank corps and 8th General Army, so we understood that they are ready for the offensive actions, but then we concluded that they will not succeed because they underestimate our ability in the resilience of the nation, not the state, because the state is a part of the nation. Nation has 3 main components in the theory of the national resilience. That is, state as a service for the citizens who make the skeleton of these, and the civil society, that is the structure of the citizens who implement their interests and also the national interests together with the state. So these 3 components were working so well together that we were able to resist the pressure of the Russian empire. Mathematically speaking, it is impossible, but nevertheless, the 3 components worked in the way that there was no intelligence which could have forecast that. And now we have the following challenge. Even under the conditions of frozen conflict, short or long, I think that actually no documents possible with the Russian Federation, because it's useless. It's literally useless, because any kind of paper where we will put our signature on, it cannot be considered to be the document, because they are going to violate these rules whenever it is possible. And the main sense of this empire is to destroy Ukraine. And of course, they want to occupy the other territories. But we are the country which Syria catastrophe, for Putin's Syria catastrophe, has shown that in 2022 we triggered the destruction of this empire. Speaking of the exact question, so I would like to clarify. So concluding, I can say that, okay, a paper signed or not signed, we understand that it's worth nothing, but some possibility for pause is in place in this case. And here then there is a question of who is faster, who is better in resisting of nation against empire. And the empires are going to use this pause. And that is the reason why we're talking. They are going to use these pause to recover. And it is important for our Western partners to understand it as well, that these pause will not be for relaxing and saying, okay, now we have peace and let's cancel sanctions, let's trade with the Russian Federation, let's trade oil and gas. That is something we should not do. This pause should be used to impose stronger sanctions and for the empire not to be able to recover. But because when we analyze the economical situation, the Russian Federation is on the verge of this very big number of problems. And the thing is that the oil prices can go down, and their financial system is in the critical situation, and it can start collapsing. And it can start collapsing not in the way how the experts say that Ukrainian front line is collapsing. It will be collapsing as the Assad regime was collapsing. And therefore, our Western partners have to understand these posts will be needed to strengthen Ukraine and to weaken the Russian Federation, to launch the tendencies which will not allow the revenge of the Russian Federation, and to enhance Ukraine in order for the Kremlin plan not to be implemented, because Kremlin will be using it to get victory for themselves. And the internal aspects of our development are crucial in this case, but the internal aspects are impossible without consolidation of the efforts with our Western partners. Why am I saying that? Because when we are talking about the strategic forces with nuclear component or without it, in this case, it has to be the joint efforts with our Western partners. So Ukraine has to understand clearly that we are the part of Europe, and Europe has to understand that even if Trump or not Trump or someone else will start dividing American division and European division of NATO, we can see that this has started. Trump requires to increase the financing by the European Union and their contribution to NATO. And by the way, so far it is not supported by the European countries. In my opinion, it's not Trump who has to start to develop this direction, but the Europeans have to get older and to have to undertake the responsibility for their security, together with Ukraine, of course. Ukraine is a part of Europe. Without Ukraine, Europe is impossible from the perspective of security. And therefore, when we are talking about we're talking about three components. I'm not talking about land or the general, so three, that is long-range system. Just remember how many countries are producing ballistic missiles. Ukraine is very close. Only Ukraine is very close to this. And when we're talking about operative ballistic systems and even bigger range, Ukraine will become the leader in developing this system. Then we are talking about anti-aircraft system. And there is no country which can produce the anti-aircraft systems which can be competing the American ones. So Aegis, for example, which is modified Typhoon, terminal altitude defense, and there is no other European country which can be doing that. Conclusion. We as Europeans, we have to establish this kind of systems, maybe together with the Americans, because I'm sure that American industry is ready for this cooperation. The third component is nuclear component. And here we shouldn't be shy about it, and let's not think that discussing nuclear weapon is something bad, because that is something we were persuaded in 30 years ago. That is, that nuclear weapon is something bad. I think that we have to be talking about that Europe has to have the component of nuclear protection, and without the U.S., we can be resisting the Russian Federation. The components that can be procured in France or otherwise, they are not enough to resist the Russian Federation. Ukraine has something to add here to the nuclear component, and therefore Europe has to understand that. And Ukraine shouldn't be shy of what we have, of our potential, and we have to suggest to Europe these three strategic components, which can be the grounds of our common defense protection system. Because we should not separate Europe and Ukraine when we're talking about defending from the Russian Federation. And many examples shows that the Russian Federation is active all around Europe, and they understand that European destabilization and destruction of consolidation in joining Ukraine, and they are creating the conditions when the Russian Federation can achieve even better results. Thank you. I'm ready to answer the questions. Maybe you have questions? Greetings, Petro Klama, expert on NATO membership. The question to the expert and to Mr. Kola. Under the conditions when the North Korea is ready to, so they will force Ukraine to conclude the unfair peace agreement with the Russian Federation. Resilience and victory plan. Does it have the complex of criteria how this plan, indicators of the fulfillment of this plan, and considering the fact of 1,000 plus days, is integral indicator can be evaluated positively or negatively? That is the first question. And the second, resilience, and how it can be compared to resilience NATO in NATO resilience in their dictionary. So I think that is a question to Mr. Mikhailo. It's a person who was not answering. So Mr. Mikhailo, can you talk about, could you tell us more about resilience? Yes, indeed. NATO, I will answer the NATO component of your question. NATO has included resilience in their vocabulary. It's a very more narrow definition. They understand it as operative tactical level, operative tactical terminology. So it is more about resilience of the army. And when we're talking about the national resilience, that is strategic term, and therefore identified it as the consolidation of three main components: state, citizens, and public society. And in fact, we were working on it since 2014, mainly with our Baltic countries, because they have a well-developed terminology on this more than 100 years ago, when they have established their volunteering army, and they have developed this matter very professionally, and this experience was very useful for us in 2022. Speaking of the evaluation, I think that Mr. Mykola Kняжицький could answer this question better, considering his experience. Well, I do not know whether China wants to humiliate the U.S. It's obvious that China and the Russian Federation and their secondary partners like Iran and Northern Korea, they just want to change the world order, and Ukraine is a precedent for them, the precedent of the future actions of China in the future. The fact that Trump relies on the agreements with China, and that in this way he will weaken China's position, well, not personally he is, but everyone considers China as a state which has to support some peaceful frozen conflict. So China is interested in Russia's victory, because for China it means enhancement of their role as a key partner for China. It's a partner as a key player in the region, and also China will have more opportunities to implement their plans in Taiwan. And considering the fact that Trump likes bargaining, in this case, maybe in the process of uneasy, in complicated situation in China, some agreements with the U.S. is possible. But personally, me, I'm not ready for that, and therefore I'm quite calm regarding all the promises to achieve peace, to freeze the conflict, because there are so many elements which can we be guessing only, but we will not know them for sure. We know that the Russian Federation is interested in destroying Ukraine, and even if they are going to free the conflict, then it'll be possible only for a short period of time. Now the Russian Federation is not going to give up on their plans. So the U.S. has the way to have an impact directly and through Saudi Arabia and other countries which extract oil on the oil prices, and of course we understand that it's a kind of element of game against the Russian Federation, and we have lots of different information which politicians use, which can be used or not used. But the fact is that there are no agreements so far. The fact is that the Russian Federation is not interested in changing their decisions in destroying Ukraine, and we can see that any kind of peaceful plans that they present is not different from what they are presenting in Istanbul. Maybe they are planning to bargain on some certain provisions, and they will insist on the Russian Orthodox Church, and that the Russian language will not be restored in Ukraine, and they hope that the next government in Ukraine will be able to restore the rights. So I think that at the moment we have lots of things on the table, and the way out to this agreement is not in place, and that China is going to assist Ukraine somehow. I have no doubt that they are not going to do that, and I have no doubt that China will not be able to humiliate the U.S. or the others. Thank you. So summary once again. So we can be thinking of the others, but we have to rely on ourselves. We have, and what was Mikhailo was saying, there are three components, and for us to reform something, we and we have to be working about deep strike, deterrence of the enemy, and also anti-aircraft missiles. So I would like to add a bit to this. So in this case, I'm not an expert. I'm just the member of the supervisory board. I'm interested as a politician to obtain the information from the experts and to provide its implementation through the acts, through the legislation. So that is a very pragmatic position, because at the moment for Ukrainian politics, we have not that many tools for the Ukrainian politics, and the ones which exist, they are not accessible for the efficient existence of the European policy and cooperation between different branches of power. And I hope that all my attempts, because I think that I should have been in those part, I'm trying to understand you and what you are talking about, and all these summaries will give us some certain guideline, because if you can hear the Russians are moving further and you cannot stop it, and what else, what next, Dnipropetrovska Oblast, and people developed bad scenarios in their heads and they don't understand how do we move forward, and therefore this kind of information is not a kind of thing which calms you down, but it brings more awareness in these cases, and you're able to develop your plan. So a few examples, very solid ones. I work in the committee which is called humanitarian committees, but media and social networks is something we work on. So something that was happening in Romania, because Romania was very painful for me, and I'm observing this situation a lot. That is how media and social networks can be used for changing the political regime. And of course, we are regulating this thing. Today we were meeting the head of our committee, and we were discussing how we can improve the projects we have on our table, which is very difficult to do on the work of the social networks. And now we can see that besides some certain limitations which concern transparency of ownership, non-anonymity, and usage of social networks, the impact on the social networks, we have to be thinking to the election code and how to limit the impact of the social networks on election campaigns. But the second aspect we are facing, even in our political force, one of the members of our political party has suggested the petition on firing the Minister of Defense. And you understand why. The first one is high-quality mines and not fulfilling the requirements of the contract. And we say that these mines have low quality, the wrong number, lots of money were wasted, and no funds and no weapon was procured. That was one problem, very big case, which is discussed in political circles. The second one is organization of the procurements of the munition by the Minister of Defense, and in the center, which is responsible for it, the relations between them, the funds were sent to the Cabinet of Ministers, and the Cabinet of Ministers to the border services, and they sent it to the Polish company, and they have no expertise to procure it, whether it's correct or not. How politicians have to perceive it? What is the threat to our defense? And all of this is under question, because there should be some kind of political responsibility, and we have only the opinion of the journalist regarding this, and the opinion of the journalist is not always professional enough. Politicians have to have the opinion of the military experts, both from the quality of the weapons, the situation on the front line, the need for these, the demand for these munition, and in this way we can control the executive branch. And being democratic country under the martial law is very difficult. That are the tools we need, and therefore this kind of consortium is very practical. Let's move forward. Speaking of the elements, we are working for 1 hour and 10 minutes, and we'll have time for the questions. So please keep your question So considering the facts which Mikhail Samus has mentioned, they were regarding the missiles and our own production, and we have the representative of the Ukrainian defense sector, Mr. Igor Fomenko, and therefore the question to you. So it seems like the reform of the defense sector is a threat to the national security. It's kind of dissonant. So when we are saying that we have to produce missiles ourselves, and then it appears to be the national threat if we are not reforming. What should we be reforming? Greetings. So let me first return and to compare what is defense military complex before the active phase and now. Around 300 entities before the war, and now we have more than 1,000, and around 130 of them are state-owned. The number of people, around 70,000 before the full-scale war, and 300,000 now. Before the full-scale war, we had the capacity $2.5 million, and now more than 30 million. So at the moment, we are developing, inventing, producing the weapons, and we are providing the services, and around 120 entities belong to a state. When we are talking about the entities, the state-owned entities, till 2018 and even till 2020, when this reform was triggered, the main organizational reform was the state entity, which was not understood, which is more understandable, which is not understandable by our foreign partners, and therefore, in 2021, we issued the law, which turned these entities to PGSC or shares, because our strategic partners do not have this kind of form of ownership. So the state entities, if we are talking from the point of view of the investment engagement, they not understand how the head of the entity is appointed. So today the government will appoint someone, and tomorrow they will change him. So they do not understand how the entity is functioning and how the control over their work is conducted. So all of these things are regulated by different codes of Ukraine, and that are, for example, the economical code, where it is written the procedure and the way how these entities work. And therefore, if we are talking about the entity of the military defense sector, yes, also it's a business, where one of the criteria is the revenues and EBT, which the entity gets from their work. So when we're talking about the perspective of the development of the military sector and the investments in this sector, we have to be clear and understandable for our partners, to understand how the decisions are made, how the heads are appointed, how long they will be on this position. And unfortunately, this reform was stopped, and of course it is not enough persuasive for our partners. And for example, if we have if they have the agreements with the directors of the state company, and tomorrow, for example, the director will be changed, and the policy of the entity can change, and also the politics regarding the international partner, and therefore we have to have the clear rights, rules of the game. So you're talking about Ukrbranprom. Ukrbranprom de jure is the PGSC, where they have the supervisory board, and I wouldn't like to discuss on how the decision is made there. I'm talking about the entities which are subordinated to the state-owned and Ukrbranprom, because the state entities enter in the space production, so they are substituted to the military production. So speaking of the production of the munition on the military vehicles. They belong to the state and the private one. So out of all these numbers of the capability of $300 billion, so $30 billion, we include here the sphere, which is not very clear for most. That is UAVs, both underground or underwater, maybe even spatial in the future, the robotized system, artificial intelligence, where there are dozens of entities which do not want even to register and to open the sites because they evaluate the risks of military strikes of the enemy, and therefore they are not even providing the statistics, and they are not in the statistics. Speaking of the amounts, I think that 1/3 is a state entities and 1/3 is a private-owned entities. The security, the potential, the average load is around 40%, and we have in fact 60% additional opportunities for the production of the military vehicles. A lack of load is due to lack of the financial resources, even despite the fact that 100% of all the fees and taxes go to provide for the army. But it is not enough, and the funds, we have the Danish model for the military equipment, and we don't have any further money, and we rely on the fact that we will cover it with the Ukrainian budget. Speaking of the perspectives for 2025, according to the budget, there is a plan to procure 7-8 billion plus 2-3 billion according to Danish model, and nevertheless we will have around 20 billion which we have to use, because otherwise we have to reduce staff capacities, and we are losing some capacities in this perspective, meaning, so from your words, I understand that the threat to the national threat is when the state will not move forward transferring the military defense sector to the private ownership. No, not at all. They can be operating in the framework of the current legislation. SPJC, for example, Naftogaz. It is owned by the state, but they have supervisory board, and there are the foreign experts, former officials who are forming the strategy, the policy of the holding. And here we have more the question regarding omitting the situation of the subjective impact of the official on the decision-making process by the director of the director, because unfortunately the directors of the state company, they are so regulated, they are so controlled, that sometimes it's better to not to make any decision than to make any decision and to be responsible for something, and sooner or later you will be punished for this responsibility. Serhii Zgurets is with us online, and as well as the Defense Express and Defense Tech. Lots of defense tech come from Defense Express. Please join our conversation.
Щось не знаю. Ага.
Сподіваюся, зараз мене чутно?
Так.
Yes, indeed. Our company makes an emphasis on the evaluation of the military defense sector, and the issue is not a simple one, because it's important not to say extra things, because we know that the enemy is tracking all our technical solutions and the trends and so on, and therefore it makes the process even more difficult of raising the awareness about this sector in public. But speaking of the problems, yes, indeed, the situation is becoming frozen, and it's very hard to change it. And we are on the stage when the majority of the entities has no work for the next year, because there are no contracts concluded which show the working load for 2025. It means that there are no contracts. It means that the drones where we're talking about, even if the contracting period will start in 1 month, in this case, in best case, the examples of the examples will be received in probably 6 months. And when we have the task to produce 3,000 of missiles, cruise missiles, or UAVs, in this case, we have the question, how can we produce it with these weird approaches to the working load of the entities and their cooperation between these entities? That is one of the things which is adding up to the ambiguous conclusions and how the government is enhancing the defense of the state. The other components are related to our, for example, the resilience plan, which is mentioned by the president in the parliament, technological council under the president of Ukraine. And we had this council, and the questions of the fast decisions had to be made there, and how can we make the changes in technological issues relying on the military experience? And I heard the opinion that people who were suggesting this technological council, they are not a part of this process. And nevertheless, when we are talking about these projects, and we are, and the experience is collected piece by piece on the front line, when that is another thing which dilutes the understanding of the strong management. And there are lots of these kind of examples. I do not want to dive deep into these negative matters, but the transparent conversation, I think it should be continued. Thank you, Mr. Sehi. I would like to add a few words to what was said. Yes, indeed. Everything is absolutely correct. So what is the problem of the phone right to, and what Mr. Fomenko was talking about? It seems like in the Soviet Union, we also had the same situation when 32-year-old Dmytro Ustinov was heading the defense sector, and he was developing the sector. And now 34-year-old Mr. Smetanov, the analog of Mr. Ustinov. So the thing is that in the work of the state entities, we can see that there is the work of any private entity cannot be interrupted by anyone, because the director is an owner and he's the one who is deciding for everything. And in the state entity, it's not the case. Without any kind of written orders, some changes can be made, and therefore the partner, they can see everything. For example, back in 2018, I guess no one remembers it at the moment, but in 2018 there was the joint enterprise which Ukrospets expert has signed from Ukrobanprom and Baykar Mahina from Turkey, from the Republic of Turkey, yeah, but nothing worked out because of these. And the second one is the lack of responsibility. When someone can call and change something, then no responsibility. So let's see who's going to be responsible for the mines, because the practice which exists at the moment is to change all the managers of the entity, and there are the entities of the Ukrobanprom where the heads were changed 4 or 6 times, but it's not an option. But at the same time, everything is fine on the top. So we consider that it's a problem. And beside that, one more small thing. So what is Ukrobanprom? Ukrobanprom is both entity Ukроборонпром owns 66 entities, so that are a bit different things. Ukроборонпром, that is 250 people, and according to the survey and researches, 39 of them are in charge of the production, and 211 nobody knows what they do. Every year they spend 20 something million hryvnias, and they establish their representations in Washington. For example, I have the question: what are they doing in Washington? If we need to have agreement with Northern Grumman or others, so that should be the ones who are responsible for the spatial programs. They have to do that, and not some kind of nephews. So we have 35 more minutes to work, 15-20 minutes for the questions, and I would like to ask Mr. Gavrilov to recap our discussion. But before this, we were talking about the technical component. We have also the social component. Could you tell us more about this? What are your offers for mobilization, demobilization, salaries for the servicemen, the justice? That are the reserves that we have, as you said, and this is an aspect which is very important when we are talking about the further war, because what Mr. Samuz was mentioning, mathematically speaking, we would have lost to the Russians long time ago. So there are lots of things we could have mentioned here, but we've heard the motto: respect, trust, and justice, because at the moment there is no feeling that everything is fair at the moment. So now among the key demands, requirements, we said that it should be impossible to have booking, economical booking. The government has to be 2 times decreased, and 50% of these representatives of the government, 27, 45 years old, have to be mobilized. I mean, those who have no medical issues. Isn't it populism when we're talking about reduction of the apparatus? No, I don't think so, because it's so expanded, and due to the fact that it's so expanded, there are the thoughts that there are the people who are concealed, hidden there. I can even give you the names, but these principles, until the time when the society will not see the children of the politicians, businessmen, and they will not see them in the army, until that time, the army is going to be the army will follow the residual concept. So there are some certain things which happened after the publication of our document. So namely, I'm talking about recruiting. Recruiting is a really positive thing. Then we have the problem of the transferring from one unit to another. It's kind of resolved, but we can see that still there are some certain obstacles on the lower levels, but nevertheless they are in place. And also we have important things like expansion of the unit thanks to recruiting. Right recently, during the last week, we've seen Ptahi Magyara is turning into brigade. Just in 1 year, they moved from squad to division. And yesterday I read that one more battalion is becoming Yastruby, is becoming the division. So all in all, there are the changes, and we will need to work on this. So the question of the fair justice is important one, and also the question of the financial support. That is something we have to be discussing, because we wrote that there should be some certain fund. But before this, from our side, there were the suggestions to the government to use all the possible opportunities and also the opportunities of the private military companies. It's interesting, but we have the private company which was suggesting during 60 days to engage 5,000 servicemen, and that is not going to be the stormers as the Russians do with Kubanians, Kuba soldiers, but there are strong people who had who served in the foreign military companies, and Ukraine will benefit from it because mobilization of Ukrainians is social payments and social protection. And when we are talking about these, it's $5,000, and the state is not responsible for the life of these servicemen. So that is one of the elements. If you don't mind, I will add a bit which we have to understand and to be aware of, and we have to be changing. For example, if we are talking about the military procurements, about the provision for the Ukrainian army, how it is done now, militaries are forming the need, how it is informed. For example, we need different categories, first, second, third, but nevertheless, it's something that the army needs. The army has their competition between different divisions, and in the general headquarters, so they are collecting all this need. Then it goes to the Ministry of Defense. The Ministry of Defense has an independent center which makes the procurements. The Ministry of Defense and this center, they are focused on one positive thing, which is called anti-corruption, which is in fact very important. But quite often, when their main objective should have been urgent supplies for the army of the high-quality munition and weapons. So that should have been their first priority. Anti-corruption is, of course, important, but the first priority should have been different. And when we are talking about anti-corruption, then there is lack of responsibility. Then there is a system. When one hat is afraid and passing this document to another one, and then someone decides that there should be the tender, and then someone decides that it's better to buy something directly, not through the mediator, and then they establish their mediator because some other mediator can create corruption risk. And in the end, when the tender is announced or when there is a call for the procurement of the munition, they might be procuring the munition, and the delivery time is 2027, 2028. It will be €100 cheaper than what we have now, but the official will be afraid to undertake the responsibility, because if he or she will pay €100 more, in this case, he or she will be responsible for it. How it should work, how we can make it more professional, how can we overcome anti-corruption, and how we can make the system professional. So after this, we have different political factors. Even if you are trying to make some transparent system, you will face the impact from the office of the president, from the cabinet of ministers, for the contract to go to one company or another. So what should we do? If we have an administrative system, if the state official will not meet the requirements, in this case, no one is responsible for it, because the signature is made by the Ministry of Defense or Ministry of Strategic Production. But in this case, it's not a collective responsibility, and that is an obstacle for the military supplies. A second important question and a key question, that is what we were talking about. Before the beginning of the so-called pacification, we had a huge human resource problem, but nevertheless we had the trust of the people in victory, because it was supported through media, through the military commanders, and then at one time the head of the armed forces of Ukraine has changed, Mr. Zaluzhny. At the same time, we had that information, and we started to have the problems with voting in the Congress for the support of Ukraine. At the same time, Hungary starts blocking the support from the European Union to Ukraine. And what does it lead to? It leads to the full lack of trust and also lack of trust to the army. And this time, before this, sociology was showing that more than 60% of Ukrainian men were ready to serve in the army. But we needed to use the right tools to enhance the recruitment tools, enhance informational campaign to debunk different style. That people are sent without preparation, and we have to show how they are prepared, and they were prepared. So all of these things should have been done. But of course, these actions were not undertaken. It was decided that it's easier to do it in an administrative way by enhancing the checkpoints, pacification of the people, and many other things which were presented in a negative way in the Russian media. For example, one example was shown as the systematic one, and we have the problem with mobilization because our units are lacking people. So what should we have done? We should have done sociological surveys. We should have understood what people want. We have to satisfy their needs and to organize informational campaign. Unfortunately, all of it was not conducted. Even though we, as representatives of the people who participate in this discussion, we were participating in the discussion with the managers of the Ministry of Defense, and we were expressing our opinion. But quite often the political reasons or administrative reasons, they are stronger than the logics of the professional organization of the process. And we want these processes to be well organized. And these reflections, which we are preparing not for half a year, I guess it will be soon 1 year, they were delivered to the heads of the government and to the defense sectoral companies. There is lots of information which is classified, which should not be known by the enemy. So we are planning the format where we will be competing the Western think tanks, which we were calling, for example, the Institute of the Development of Peace, for this part of this information to be well known to the people, to the citizens, but not to harm the militaries, for the society to join together and to be working together with AFU and the government. You were mentioning sociology, and recently I had the opportunity to talk to the chief recruit, the head of the recruit department of Azov, Milan, and they had sociological survey on why, for example, people do not want to serve in Azov. And of course, they clarified some certain things. And by the way, it was interesting. One of the reasons was that people who are volunteers and who want to show themselves, they do not want to go to legendary unit because they have some legends there, and it will be hard for them to achieve something really big. But another interesting thing, Azov, when they are doing this recruiting, they are conducting their sociological survey. It was very weird for me that the government, when they are talking about the reserves and sociology, they do not have any kind of serious surveys on the war and the mobilization. And at the same time, we have open and closed political markets. Mr. Ihar, you wanted just to add something. Thank you very much. I would like to return to the military defense sector. So what is the future of our complex? So that is technologies. So if we are talking about the future technological decisions and solutions, we are talking about anti-aircraft system, missile systems, radio location systems, German systems are pricey, and for example, the missile complex is developed during a few years, even dozens of years, and a few billion are spent in R&D. And we need fast solutions and partners who will help us to provide for the army. Quite often from the developers, when you are talking, you hear R&D, but you have to explain to the audience. Research and development, so that is the investments in the development of the modern weapons. And therefore, we need to have fast decisions to provide for the army. And therefore, we have to engage the leaders of the technological processes. What will be the locket market, how it was going to work. So first of all, who is my partner? What are they developing? Compliance and so on and so forth. So all processes. And this algorithm will be well developed there, and it will be applied also for the Ukrainian partners. So we have to be clear here from the point of view of the partners. So there are going to be the questions. First of all, the intellectual property right, the investment rights, the protection in the law enforcement and the courts, and all this pressure on the courts and law enforcement, which we observe now, also including on the military defense sector. And all of these things have to be resolved for the investors, also of the technological technological investors, to enter our market and to develop the new samples which will support the priorities we're talking. And also the question to Mr. Alexei Yezhak. So right now, during this conference, I read that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation was announcing the task for 2025 that they want to occupy 4 Ukrainian oblasts, which are already in the constitution of the Russian Federation. But let's not forget about Crimea, the 5th one. And in fact, that I see that there is discussion, so they are kind of refusing already from the Trump's plans, negotiation plans of Trump. So can we perceive it in this way? Yes, so we can perceive it in this way because we do know that the Russians, for quite a few times, they said that they see no. That they consider Trump's forces useless. It's seeing that they can promote Russian forces in Ukraine wherever they want. Until the point, and at the moment, the Russian Federation doesn't believe that they will fail, and therefore they are going to move forward. And Putin feels, and you can feel it from, he doesn't believe that he can fail. And he doesn't believe in his failure, and therefore he is telling us his conditions. So now speaking of these pause and peacemakers, so the situation is that not the politics decides what is going to happen, but the frontline decides what is going to happen in politics. So depending on where the army moves from the east to the west or from the west to the east, depending on these, any kind of success of any peaceful initiatives pauses and rests depends on, because at the moment the situation is like that. So I think that it doesn't mean that it's catastrophe, that the Russian Federation is not willing to have negotiations. But nevertheless, critically speaking, in the framework of the national policy, the question is whether Trump will dare to make some unsuccessful peace initiatives after inauguration, or maybe he is going to wait for these offensive actions will fail and Ukrainian offensive actions will take place. So yes, so we can ask this question in these ways. But yes, at the moment the Russian Federation is moving forward, and they do not consider negotiations to be something that they need, or they require something absolutely unacceptable for Donald Trump. Yes, dear friends, now we will have questions, but as I would have mentioned, and I think that it will be really correct if we would have recapped our discussion, and in the framework of, I can suggest a short blitz interview. From what we've heard, Mr. Volodymyr, if we will have the pause, we do not know whether it is going to be in place. We will have to do some structural reforms and changes. What we hear right now is that we have to reform on the level of the brigade corps. So that is a recruiting system. Is it possible? So, for example, considering the experience from the fields, will they change us? Will they improve Ukraine and Ukrainian army? Or maybe it's worth talking now about shifting to absolutely professional army with high salaries, engage in the private military companies. So 2 main things. Maybe they are not even interrelated. Well, first of all, the Russian Federation, it's clear that they will not refuse. So the Russian Federation will be refusing from negotiations until they have the advantage on the land. And we have to demonstrate that it's not something that will happen. And all their visual desires, demands, so are not matching the reality. We can remember Syria, and Putin was saying in 2017 that we can give lots of examples, but speaking of Ukraine, we have to use all the advantages we have in this conflict. We have advantages. The advantages are related to our society. Advantages are related to our partners. With our partners, we have a big wall of European and American companies. Maybe they lack some decisions, but nevertheless, the resources are bigger than the Russian Federation has. The Russian Federation has less GDP than Texas GDP or California GDP. So what can we be talking about in this case? All their desires, all their desire to prolongate the war, all of this is collapsing when it comes to resources. Speaking of us, we have very dynamic, very enthusiastic civil society. That is our features. That is something we have comparing to the others. That is flexibility everywhere possible in innovations. That is our advantage. And also very sincere relations and communications with the society. So we have, first of all, to provide, to make our army to be implementing the new methods of the new ways of combating with new technologies which the Russian Federation will never have. These technologies are developing both in Ukraine and in the enemy country. If we will use all the innovative technologies which were not used before, if we will teach the militaries how to use them, if we will be able to prepare the people for them, in this case the Russian Federation will have no chances to keep these territories. And in this case, we are talking about the readiness to the maximum implementation of these technologies, and we have to limit all the obstacles which we have in this case. The obstacles which are bureaucratic one, political one, anything. And therefore, speaking of the servicemen who are the priority, they have to have professional managers and the system of the preparation of the staff and absolutely clear and open doors for the innovations, for testing and then scaling up where it is possible. And in this case, when combining all these technological advantages, human enthusiasm, advantage and the support of the partners, in this case the Russian Federation has no chances to win this war. First of all, thanks to technological solutions and also the usage of the new methods of warfare, and also the factor of the engagement of people to absolutely risky situations. We do not need huge units for the stormer offensive actions that the Russian Federation does. We have to do it in the way so that we could find the enemy on the turret up to in the range of up to 200, and if needed we can destroy the enemy 200 kilometers. In this case we can create gray zones where any servicemen will be allowed. In this case we will not be thinking on how many soldiers do they have in their armies, so we will be destroying them before they see Ukrainian soldiers. That is something we have to be thinking about, and then nothing can stop it, not political factors or any other thing. So all of these relies on the readiness of the servicemen to change the system, less bureaucracy, and also political will of our government not to create the obstacles in this process, especially in the human resource issues. Human resource issues is number one question during this kind of transformation. So the human resource questions is interrupted by the political process. Not always the political. So people who make the decisions are not always, do not have the expertise quite often, and there are no other options. We have lots of staff changes, but when any new people are appointed, we have to be thinking about their capability, their capacity, and also we have to prepare the reserves of these people in case something happens, because the war is killing or something else is happening. So all the time we have to have reserves, and we have to prepare them before these question arises. Okay, so 2025, what are the realistic possibilities? Technological ones, for example, when it comes to gray zone. So first of all, we have done a lot during these 2-3 years. We started this war from scratch. And I remember February 2022, I was appointed the Deputy Minister of Defense 3 weeks before the full-scale war, with the great ideas of transformation of the protection sector of the military industry, and we had the law on the military procurements. So lots of different reflections. And at the same time, on the 24th of February 2022, we understood that we have nothing, and we have nothing but our enthusiasm, and that's it. And therefore, thanks to our enthusiasm, thanks to our readiness to protect, to defend our country, we attracted the attention of our partners, and they covered our needs for some short period of time. Then we have expanded, and during this time, we've done a lot of work. First of all, we have launched the energy of our society for the innovations. Before the full-scale war, there were only 5 companies producing UAV. And then, after half a year, we had 200 companies of different types, small ones, big ones, which were offering something to the Minister of Defense. And some of the companies, some of the small groups, they were delivering even to the army. And even the Minister of Defense didn't know that, because they were finding the money somewhere, and then they were making kamikaze drones, and they were sending that to their relatives. And that is something that is impossible in the other countries. And therefore, we have achieved a lot during these 2-3 years. In 2025, I think that we will see the technological result of all of these, because the developments, the inventions we have, and which are evolving all the time, they will show their efficiency. They will reduce the threat of the limited mobilization resources, and we will have the predictable support of the partners. Without problems with the economy, we will not be able to overcome the situation alone, and therefore we will have to have communication with the US, and all in all, it will help us to be strong on any kind of negotiations, and Russia will not prevail if we will have the support of the West. So the Putin's group, they are delivering him the wrong information that everything is fine, and in fact they are working on the verge of their opportunity. They just hope that the day will come when the black swan for Ukraine will arrive, and it will happen like in Syria, but for Ukraine. All Ukrainian army will disappear, and they will win. But it will never happen. They do not understand the Ukrainian civil society. They do not know that. They do not know what is that. And therefore, it depends on our internal calm, cold head. Less publicity about the topics which are related to some problems, for example, procurement of something, but at the same time, less publicity has to be compensated with more communications with the heads of the country and the heads of the civil society in the closed, in the semi-closed formats. When people are doubting, they know where they can go. They know that there will be the representative of the office of the president or the representative of the ministry, and he or she will explain everything. So that is the communication we're striving for. Not just to show everything publicly when everyone is running around and nobody understands what is happening. That should be the communication between those who are preparing the decision, human society, with minimum publicity, because it is important, and that is one of the elements which we have to take in account during this war. In peaceful time, we can be saying whatever we want in the newspapers, on TV, but during the war, we have to be careful, that because any publicity in these matters can be the source for our enemy. And once again, we should not establish the situation when there is a lack of communication between the civil society and the decision makers. So we need to have the constant discussion in the closed and semi-closed formats. Thank you very much. The questions? Mr. Valeriy?
Я дякую Дякую за все
Валерію, а
викладене.
можна вас попросити ще, щоб
Could we ask you, someone is in rush? I wanted to ask a question. Can I ask a question? I will be very brief. So speaking of what we've heard in the end, the recap of everything that was discussed, so that is all the negative and positive things of what was said. The question is, why am I saying it in this way? Because even the evaluation of Trump, that he is not reading analytical products, analytical materials, we should not provide people with disinformation. With all my respect, you have one source of information. Trump reads the materials. He was reading just in front of me, and therefore, what I would like to ask you. So I've heard very detailed, narrow, specialized topic, and the suggestions you have, they are outside of this sphere. They are covering lots of questions, as Mr. Valeriy would say, about the system on how to communicate and how this information should be delivered. So it is very important because being the deputy minister and now the expert is a very good combination of experience. So I have the question, maybe to you, maybe to someone else. So the question, do you have it in your researches, and not only this, maybe in bulletin, the analysis of the research component, the funds? Meaning that the research component, including what Mr. Alexei Yezhak was mentioning, that there's going to be the pause, maybe it will not be there. So I used to work as a state official. There will be pause and there won't be pause. It's like plus minus 30 billion hryvnia. So you say that we lack funds. Yes, and I can say that we have funds. If I'm not mistaken, tomorrow in the parliament, $2 billion are going to be considered tomorrow to finalize the construction of the blocks on the Khmelnytska power plant. And Adam says that that are going to be their funds, like these people have their pocket money. So I have the question. The things which you're analyzing, do you have the numbers there? How much each of these positions items costs? Scenario 1, scenario number 2. So, and if you do not have, so don't you think that in this case, maybe it is possible and important to add a few scenarios and what each scenario costs for the country, including the scenario with the pause, that is a very interesting scenario, the scenario of prolongation of the war, and the other scenarios. So maybe that is a question to Mr. Knyazhitsky, because it's a more strategic question. Thank you very much for your attention. If we're talking about reflections, that is the set of actual relevant materials. So that is a weekly edition. So that are the weekly editions which are commenting the situation which occurred this week. For example, North Koreans in Kurska Oblast and politicians are analyzing the reasons and the consequences from both international perspective and military perspective. What you are talking about, different scenarios for the next year and about different scenarios for the government which is now in the administration. This information is in our weekly editions, but right today we had the latest analytical project, and I can tell you what do we have there.
І про що сьогодні написали аналітик.
And what analyticians wrote today in reflection. So today it is the risks of the human resource. That is what Mr. General was mentioning. The new defense policy in Europe, Donald Trump, the pressure on the Russian Federation. I'm not going to quote some strategic occupied entities, the directions of work of the Russian military defense sector. So all of it concerns any kind of pauses, because we know that the Russian military complex is going to continue development. We analyze what is happening there as well, and saying that at the moment we have some certain amount and the scenario. So I'm talking about our, not about Americans. So let me clarify very briefly. Mr. Gavrilov, so he knows more about it. So today we have some certain announcements, statements about the number of the fallen and missing. We've heard this number, and I don't want to repeat. Some things shouldn't be repeated. But we know these numbers, and we know approximately the number of the missing people. After the pause of the war, there will be the question of making these people not missing but fallen, and we do understand that. So the bodies will be delivered at the beginning of the process. So we are talking about dozens of thousands of people, and every person has to get 15 million hryvnias. Just multiply these 15 million hryvnias by this number. And I'm not talking about the other expenditures. Just a simple question: do you take it in account? Because external partners will not give you money for that. The U.S. will not give you money for that, except for maybe the case, maybe we with Vladimir Valeriy, we were promised the genetic expertise of the fallen, so that is a thing we were promised. But the funds for the compensation of these expenditures, 15 million to each family, will not be in place. So just calculate it once again. What are the numbers? Where can we find this money? And if we do not know where we can get this money, in this case, what is the scenario of everything you're talking about right now? So where can we get the funds for the production if Energoatom gets this money and the defense doesn't get this money? Where the people can get this money from? Because you know how much everything costs now. So Ukrainian side, especially in the parliament, due to adoption of the budget, can we rely on something in 2025? Or so to say, Mr. General Gavrilov, speaking of the funds and the social payments, and the general question is, what we will manage in 2025? Pause or continuation of defense? What is more realistic for the country? I mean, with the partners and with our internal resources. Mr. General is more aware of many questions regarding the military issues. You are asking political question. That is political question, because when Prime Minister was saying that the defense budget was planned for half a year, because officially saying that they were, for some reason, the government thought that the war will finish in mid-2024, then who can tell you that the government is going to say something like that, and why? So therefore, the answer, so speaking of the missing people, that is a very painful and important question, which concerns everyone. I think that you have relatives, you're members of the family and acquaintance who are in this situation, because we know when the expertise failed and people know that people are fallen, and the military administration says it, but in the document it is still said that this person is missing. And of course, the payments, the payments are declared as high ones. And does anyone think, what are we going to do? Nobody is raising this question, as well as many other questions. The analyticians have to say, so you raised a very important question. Analyticians have to calculate and to warn the government that this question, as well as millions of others, in case we will have peace, they will occur right in front of their face, and that political circles have to start thinking about it. And that is the work of the consortium which we are presenting today.
Питання ОПК. Дозвольте?
Так, я не знаю, чи нас ще не будуть звідси виганяти, чи нас ще є можливість.
Пан Валерій.
Yeah. Mr. Valeriy is going to make us move out of here. If you don't mind, I would like to answer the military industry complex. So speaking of the budget, 100% and everything that Ukraine gets, it is for the defense sector, and then the defense sector is structures what they are spending this money for. Except for the Danish model, we have no live model. MTD gives us a Danish model, started working, and maybe we will have 2-3 billion, but for some certain purposes. in 2025. Speaking of Energoatom and the others, that is the source of this money. And therefore, if we have 50% or more spent on the defense, and that is 100% what we are collecting, the rest is borrowings. And they are not multi-purpose. So, for example, if we say that it's for Energoatom, for the war, they will give it, but for the war, they will not give it. So that is a bit different. And yes, indeed, we lack funds. And in fact, we have two options. We have to find money, or to ask for them, to ask money for the war, but no one wants to allocate funds for the war, and therefore reframing the budget which is adopted or the changes were made. So that is a question of the source of those who is providing us the funds for these or the other purposes. Mr. Volodymyr? So now we are talking not about money. Ukraine has to survive, and the budget is going to increase for 5%, and even if the budget will grow, it will not cover our needs. The question is where these resources can be found. We understand it external from the partners, and what are our options, starting from the confiscated assets and the frozen assets, what is now being done, at least in the European Union, some percentage is going to be sent to Ukraine, and also speaking of the Lend-Lease programs, for example. Lend-Lease, which is popular at the moment, it is not used in Ukraine. We do not get any kind of resources like the Soviet Union got from the US during the Second World War. At that time, the Soviet Union and the UK and the other coalition members, they got the loans from the US government, and thanks to these loans, they were able to procure the weapons. During these 2-3 years, we got free of charge technical assistance. So in Europe and in the US, they were taking it from the warehouses and they were delivering it here. So what is the difference? The Trump is suggesting, not for the first time, he suggests going from these free of charge assistance where no one is responsible for anything to more predictable situation, and the loans with minimum interest, but the ones which we will have to return one day. And here we have the question, how we can get these loan resources from our partners, under which programs, and also the for compensation of the social payments. And here we have to be very honest, very objective, and very transparent discussion should take place on each of these projects. And I'm quite sure that on each of these questions, we will get financial answer if everything will be fine. And that will be the loan, which will be closed thanks to confiscated Russian assets. And that's it. But there should be communication and clear position, strategy, and the approach of the Russian side first, from Ukrainian side first of all. If we are concerned about the compensation on the missing people, we have to tell our partners, we have this question discussed in the society. The price is so much $1 billion. We don't have these billions, and let's think together how we can use the loan which can cover this need. And when everyone will understand how this loan will be done and how we can avoid corruption or risks, in this case we will get this loan, and we will get the loan for the negotiations, but we have to show that we are ready for victory and that we have the internal plan of actions which will be understandable for our partners. So I think that Mr. Valeriy is emphasizing that we are not discussing that it's an uncomfortable topic that is not being discussed. So I think we have to wrap up, Mr. Valentin, your question, and then we are finalizing. As a co-founder of today's presented consortium, you will be finalizing. So let me add a few words to what was said about the economical aspects and about the work of our consortium. Well, in fact, the key question, the key task which consortium has, and the information and the defense sector, that is a paradoxical out-of-box solutions, which can be some kind of hint. And if we are talking about the financial aspect, in this case, together with the Institute of the International Relations, our consortium has developed not the system, but the mechanism, not of lend-lease, but of leasing. And we have suggested it, and through the partners in London, we have suggested that we are ready to organize leasing, to describe the mechanism, leasing of Typhoon systems. Mr. Mikhailo was mentioning today, Typhoon systems, which the US wanted and want to place in Germany. And we think that during this pause, we need these Typhoon systems in Ukraine, because standard missile 6 is 207 kilometers, and it can strike a long range. And also there are Tomahawks, which will reach all the missile plants on the territory of the Russian Federation. Why the Europeans have to sign in? Because the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland has said in the beginning of autumn, said that Europe gave only 1% of the IDP of the European Union as the technical assistance. They feel the smoke of the war, and they will sign the documents needed for the negotiations. I would like to thank all of you for the attention. I want to reassure you that we will be still thinking out of box and looking for the solution. So I think that is a demand, the request. Today it was a presentational type, and we can go deeper into details, and we can discuss broader questions and talk how we can find the way out. So thank you very much for your attention.